Here is a recap of a few stories that happened this week in the Trump administration. One this I will gladly say is that I love that they serve with hate against their own civilians, and at the end, evil catches up to them as we watch. First story, chaos at the top. Everyone is jumping ship. Oh my goodness. You guys will not even believe the absolute train wreck happening behind the scenes right now, because it is pure, unadulterated chaos, and everyone is literally jumping ship. If you thought the high drama was over, think again, because the walls are completely crumbling down and nobody wants to be left holding the bag. First of all, let us talk about the literal mass exodus happening in the cabinet, because it is getting embarrassingly empty over there. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Remur just packed up her bags and hauled tail out of the administration after getting absolutely slapped with insane misconduct allegations. We are talking massive inquiries into complaints about her completely abusing her power, allegedly having a juicy affair with a subordinate security guard, drinking alcohol right on the clock, and using taxpayer money for personal trips. And guess what? She tried to blame the deep state and the media for trying to undermine the mission, but she is officially out. And Stephen Cheung had to go on social media just to quietly announce she is heading to the private sector, while Deputy Labor Secretary Keith Sonderling scrambles to take over as acting head. But wait, it gets so much worse, because she is the third high-profile cabinet departure in just weeks. Remember when Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem got completely booted back in March, and then Attorney General Pam Bondi got fired earlier this month? The turnover is completely out of control. There were even massive rumors that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was next on the chopping block, though the White House is desperately denying that one to save face. And as if that was not enough of a complete circus, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard just threw her hands up and resigned too. She claimed she needed to step away because her husband is battling cancer, which is incredibly sad. But insiders are loudly whispering that there were massive divisions behind closed doors after the decision to strike Iran, and she just could not take the heat anymore. The career diplomats are getting completely purged and sidelined too, with around 3,000 employees abandoning the State Department, which is a massive 15% cut to the domestic staff. Then Marco Rubio went and ordered this unprecedented, totally chaotic recall of about 30 ambassadors worldwide right before the holidays without warning, leaving over 100 ambassador posts completely vacant across the globe. It was such a brutal, messy ambush that the departing officials are literally calling it the Saturday Night Massacre. People at the National Security Council were left with absolutely zero formal guidance on major world issues like NATO or Ukraine, forced to literally stare at a dedicated screen refreshing Truth Social all day, just to figure out what the actual policy was based on random social media signals. It is totally wild and completely dysfunctional. Even on the other side of the aisle, the drama is spilling over because Senator John Fetterman is dealing with a total staff revolt. His chief of staff, Cabell St. John, just abruptly resigned right before a massive, damning news report exposed his bizarre relationship with David Dovey. Sayfire, an Orthodox Jewish fundraiser who has basically turned into an unofficial puppet master in his office, attending top-secret meetings and taking calls with Benjamin Netanyahu while actual staffers get totally isolated. Cabell was the very last original staffer left from 2023, and she walked out the door because Fetterman keeps breaking with his party and voting with Trump on immigration and war powers. It is a total, messy political crisis all around, and nobody can keep a single team together. The whole system is fracturing right before our eyes. People are screaming behind closed doors, and the rats are officially fleeing the sinking ship. Second story, rumor mill meltdown. The Vance marriage is cracking under pressure. Oh my goodness, grab your coffee and sit down, because the absolute pettiness and drama coming out of Washington right now is hitting a literal boiling point, and the rumors about J.D. Vance and his wife Usha are getting absolutely wild. Everyone is whispering that as his political career faces massive stress, Their marriage is completely fracturing behind closed doors. And honestly, the receipts people are pulling are just too juicy to ignore. First of all, the internet completely lost its mind over that incredibly awkward, way too intimate public embrace between JD and Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, at a Turning Point USA event at the University of Mississippi. We are talking about an embrace where Erica literally ran her hand all the way through the vice president's hair while he was smiling from ear to ear, looking completely thrilled, which immediately sent shockwaves through social media with people screaming that there was trouble in paradise. Erica tried to go on the Megyn Kelly show to totally roll her eyes and claim she is just a natural hugger, who embraces everyone like that, but nobody is buying it because right after that, Usha Vance started fueling the absolute fire by repeatedly stepping out in public, completely missing her wedding ring. She was spotted totally ringless while walking alongside First Lady Melania Trump at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and then she did it again at another high-profile holiday volunteer event at Joint Base Andrews. The White House tried to put out a desperate, completely hilarious statement to People magazine claiming that Usha is just a busy mother of 3 young children who does a ton of dishes and simply forgets her giant rock upstairs. But please, who actually believes a second lady is scrubbing her own pots and pans while living in the absolute lap of luxury? JD tried to clear the air during an intense NBC News interview, claiming they both just get a kick out of it and find the social media circus funny, but then he went on the Katie Miller podcast and dropped some seriously miserable hints about their actual personal life. He literally admitted that ever since joining Donald Trump's ticket, their spark is basically gone. They can no longer do normal date nights, and that he had to invent a mandatory husband-wife book club just to force them to sit down and have something to actually talk about. If you have to legally force your spouse to read a book just to have a conversation, things are clearly on life support. And then, to make matters 10 times worse, a massive viral post from comedian Suzanne Lambert completely exposed them for allegedly having a massive, screaming argument at a restaurant, where it was loud enough to completely quiet the entire room, and Usha was overheard bitterly snapping, "This is what our life should actually be like," implying she wants absolutely nothing to do with this chaotic political nightmare and misses her old, quiet legal career. JD tried to turn the whole restaurant disaster into a sarcastic joke on social media, tweeting that he always wears an undershirt when he goes out to fight loudly with his wife, but the cover-up is completely transparent. Insiders are saying Usha is totally miserable being used as a political prop, especially with JD constantly making public comments about wanting her to convert from Hinduism to Christianity, and pushing extreme policies that make it sound like marriage is just a forced, miserable duty you have to endure. With his approval ratings completely tanking and staff fleeing the administration, it looks like the pressure is totally fracturing the home front, and the rumors of an impending divorce are refusing to die down. It gets even worse, because the sheer level of audacity coming out of the administration right now is honestly mind-blowing. We have Pete Hegseth and JD Vance out here aggressively pushing their radical ideologies, and they are literally trying to change the entire way that Jesus operates, which is just completely insane. They are seriously out here boldly telling us that Christians are just supposed to blindly accept wars, violence, and bombing campaigns like it is no big deal. I am so sorry, but I'm not buying it for a single second, and quite frankly, it makes me absolutely furious because anyone who actually reads the word knows that Jesus is completely against all of that bloodshed and destruction. It is honestly so messy and hypocritical for them to use faith as a political weapon to justify conflict when the true gospel is all about peace, love, and protecting innocent lives. But leave it to Pete Hegseth and JD Vance to twist the scripture just to fit their own aggressive, warmongering agenda. They want the whole church to just nod along and bless these bombs, but real believers see right through the absolute garbage they are spewing, and people are rightfully talking about how completely toxic and unhinged this whole push is getting behind closed doors. You cannot just rewrite the Prince of Peace to match your military fantasies, but they are trying it anyway, and it is creating a massive, chaotic divide because we refuse to let them hijack the faith for their political games. Third story: Trump's ultimate legal and political nightmare unfolds. You guys, grab your popcorn and sit down right now because Donald Trump is officially living through his actual absolute worst nightmare, and the sheer amount of chaos, panic, and disaster exploding all around him today is hitting a literal boiling point. The walls are completely crumbling down from every single direction, and his team is reportedly behind closed doors screaming, panicking, and desperately throwing everything at the wall just to stop the bleeding. First of all, let us talk about the massive, humiliating legal slap in the face that just went down in a Virginia federal court, because this one is a total, unmitigated disaster for him. A federal judge named Lenny Brinkema just stepped in and completely frozen that shady, highly controversial $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund that Trump and his allies were trying to set up. We are talking about a massive pot of money that was literally cooked up after Trump and his sons sued over his leaked tax returns. And instead of defending the case, the administration basically tried to settle it by creating this insane $1.776 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund. The plan was to let Trump-appointed commissioners hand out giant bags of cash to anyone claiming to be a victim of government weaponization, with people furiously pointing out that even January 6th rioters could have lined their pockets with your tax dollars. But Judge Brinkema said absolutely not, issuing a brutal temporary restraining order to block the government from transferring a single dime or taking any further action before things get irreversibly dispersed. It is an incredibly embarrassing, high-profile shutdown that completely exposes the administration's backroom dealings, and critics are laughing their heads off while the White House scrambles to figure out how to explain this absolute mess to the public. But wait, it gets so much worse for Donald because his long-standing, toxic obsession with his past connections is roaring back to haunt him in the most public way possible. His legal team just had to desperately refile a massive $10 billion powerhouse lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch's Dow Jones empire, all because a Florida judge named Darren Gales completely threw their original case out of court last month. They are losing their absolute minds over a July 2025 investigative report that detailed a totally wild, scandalous, and supposedly bawdy birthday card that Trump allegedly sent to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein back in 2003, complete with a drawing of a naked woman's torso and an imagined conversation between the two of them. Trump is furiously screaming that the letter is a total fake, completely fabricated, and that it absolutely does not exist, but the fact that his high-priced lawyers had to crawl back into court with a revised complaint that is 7 pages longer, desperately trying to prove actual malice, while the judge blocks them from doing discovery, is an absolute, humiliating circus. It pits him directly against his own former media allies at Fox and the Journal, proving that the old Epstein ghosts are completely refusing to stay buried, and it is driving him completely unhinged behind the scenes. And as if his domestic legal failures were not enough of a total train wreck, his entire foreign policy agenda is completely fracturing into a chaotic, terrifying mess over the war with Iran. Insiders are leaking that a fragile, highly unpalatable 60-day memorandum of understanding has been hammered out by negotiators, but Trump is completely paralyzed and terrified to officially sign off on it because the sticking points are a total nightmare. Vice President J.D. Vance had to go out and awkwardly face reporters, admitting that they are not there yet, and are aggressively going back and forth on language points regarding Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile and enrichment rules. The whole draft peace agreement has been circulated to allies like Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel, and it is causing an absolute, massive uproar because it requires a permanent ceasefire that includes Lebanon and defers any real nuclear commitments from Tehran, which Israel completely hates. To make the entire global stage look like a literal psychiatric ward, Trump went out and publicly threatened to literally blow up Oman if they try to coordinate a separate deal with Iran to impose shipping tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. Senior diplomats in Oman are reportedly shocked, furious, and completely insulted by his unhinged rhetoric, while Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is out here threatening brutal sanctions against anyone who complies with Iran's new Persian Gulf Strait Authority. The entire Middle East strategy is completely falling apart. The ceasefire agreed back in April is on the verge of an absolute, catastrophic collapse, and the career diplomats are warning that oil tankers passing through without permission could trigger an all-out explosion at any second. From federal judges blocking his billionaire slush funds, to embarrassing Epstein lawsuits blowing up in his face, to his entire military and foreign policy team threatening to blow up peaceful allies, Donald Trump is trapped in a multi-front disaster where he cannot win a single battle. His inner circle is completely eating itself alive, and the entire administration is looking like a dysfunctional, screaming circus that is completely out of control. Feel free to comment amen at the end of the prayer because this helps to keep us connected. The Lord be with you all. Love always.